Good morning, YouTube, and today we get to talk about casters. You probably read the title and assumed, oh, casters are only bad at endgame, or, oh, my caster's fine. And you'd probably be correct, but one of my main focuses is actually heroic leveling. I've read through quite a few forum posts, and some people believe that casters are good, and some of the casters are not so good. So there's really no right or wrong answer because there are good casters like Druid or Sorcerer, and there are other casters like Artificer or Wizard. Of course, you don't always need to go the caster route in the early levels, but every style should be given a better chance at leveling rather than struggling. And what that means is I shouldn't need to play melee at an early level, then have to swap to a caster. A particular forum post caught my eye by Constantine19. Hope I'm saying that name right, where they specified that they were a returning player after 2 to 3 years, and they built a few casters to try them out. More or less so, they tried a wizard and they struggled. They built a few others like Warlock, but they didn't like how it was just pressing left click and basically not interacting with the game. But I don't fault them for struggling, as wizards are in an extremely bad place at the moment. So it got me thinking, how bad are casters actually? And after reflecting on a lot of the casters, their choices, their spells, feats, and early levels, there's not enough area of effect spells, and even if you have area of effect, the spell damage really isn't that high. I've played a First Life on a lot of these classes, and I can tell you right now that some of them just don't flow as well as the others do. Let's give an example for Druid. They have Produce Flame, Salt Ray, Call Lightning, are their three main spells, none of which are area of effect. You don't really get a lot until level 7 when you pick up Flame Strike, but that's just an example. Bard, your really only two good ones are Shout and Soundburst, which is actually pretty decent, but then you look at Wizard and you got the same ones as Sorcerer, but you just can't do as much damage as Sorcerer does. For an Alchemist, I did double curative admixtures, which are the negative vials, and you can't even do undead quests when you do that. The two casters that I found very challenging to level were both Artificer and Wizard. You could always go the Eldritch Knight route, which is kind of strong in heroics, but why should you suffer choosing a different style when you intended to go caster? You shouldn't need to build for melee damage and or carry yourself from shrine to shrine. It's just not feasible in a game like this. But just because you could doesn't mean you should. So how can we fix this? There isn't a long-term easy solution. You could increase the spell point pool, but that does nothing and the damage is still very lackluster. You could increase the overall damage of the spells, which is a start, thanks to Arcane Trickster increasing Magic Missile, Scorching Ray, Frostland, but you still have to live with single target spells, which is very slow in the early levels. You could always introduce or buff area of effect spells, which is a start and helps some of the struggling casters out, but it would be which spells to buff and how to buff them. That's not a decision for myself to make, but more so the developers. I can only tell you based on my experience with leveling and the spell list, and if you don't believe me, make a low life wizard and try to level that. There just isn't enough spell points to make them good. You have to rely on Eldritch Knight. Another topic for discussion is casters at endgame. I think some of them are definitely okay, but some of them don't really do that well. As we've seen recently with the introduction of Arcane Tricksters, they are probably one of the best casters right now, besides maybe Cold Druid or Sorcerer, because they have very high DCs, they have decent damage output, and they have good crowd control if you decide to pick up Soundburst as a stolen magic or Flash Freeze. And it can easily be run as a first life compared to other casters that may need a few past lives to back them up. The main reason that Sorcerer or Cold Druid would do well, Sorcerer just kind of got a little mini pass with Frostlance getting a buff, and Cold Druid just being generally one of the best casters out there, is the Frozen Wanderer Filigree set giving 5% crit chance. It puts them ahead of other types, but it's not always fair when a Filigree set gives them an advantage. I think to start that they should lift the Reaper 7 penalty. It's been roughly 2 years having to deal with this penalty, and it isn't a solution to all casters, but it does help them out in dungeons compared to melees or ranged, which blow through dungeons as you've seen in my previous videos. But you'll always need a more thorough and direct pass through some spells, which would be a necessity to patch out the imbalance between melee and ranged versus casters. It would help some of the HP bloat, but not everything, especially if you get a carrion crawler. Sometimes they've got 100k hit points for no reason. Because there's no way any caster is going to be able to do 200 million damage in a raid without losing their mind. For example, Carlia has about 70 million on R1 in threats. Bloated HP isn't the solution to increase power, and it definitely doesn't help casters. And one of the main reasons that myself or others have stated why they've dropped caster was because endgame content. Reaper content specifically, rating as well. Reaper content, if you are a casual player, you probably aren't going to experience this, but if you were to run into R7 or R10, you don't do as much damage as melees are ranged, and they've kind of fallen off that meta where they just don't do enough damage to compete, especially with ranged. As much as I am an endgame player, I've just lost interest in caster in any capacity due to them just not being good. There just isn't enough spell points or damage compared to even ranged. They get a free one tap hunt and with or without IPS that does a lot of damage. And spells don't compare to the damage, or they just have extremely long cooldowns that makes them feel like they can't contribute enough in quests or raids. Sometimes your spell points run out because of the group you're playing with. I'd like to try and discuss how to fix casters in general, rating and endgame content, but I don't even know where to begin. I don't have enough time to discuss that in this video. You don't have enough spell points, you don't have enough damage, your spells feel very long sometimes as a cooldown. It just feels bad that even people are not accepting casters into their groups with raids, which is unacceptable, and it shouldn't be that bad to a point where people have to decline casters in a raiding group. I have several more thoughts, but there's just not enough to say in this video. It's already getting long enough, and it was intended to be less than 10 minutes. But it could be a larger topic for another video. I'm really hoping that this video, in regards to casters, creates a shout or a plea for help that the developers will watch or hear and try to help us out. It's definitely not an easy path to fix casters. It definitely needs to be a priority. Let me know your thoughts about casters. Should they buff single target spells, introduce more area of effect, or just give more spell points to casters? Or should they remove the Reaper 7 to Reaper 10 penalty? I'd love to hear your comments. If you liked the video, please consider subscribing, leaving a like and or a comment, as it helps the algorithm out. And that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. See ya.